Welcome to the Business for Breakfast seminar series presented by Huddleston Bolin. Business for Breakfast seminars provide very practical information for business people on topics ranging from sales and marketing to customer service, employee relations, technology, and accounting. For information about upcoming seminars, go to www.huddlestonbolin.com/events. Today's seminar is Employment Policies You Need to Review Now. Our guest speaker is Ashley French, a partner at Huddleston Bolin. Co-sponsors for this seminar are Huddleston Bolin LLP, the Small Business Administration, and SCORE. I'm Thomas McChesney with Huddleston Bolin. We are here in our Charleston office having a seminar today on employment policies that you need to review now. I'm with a partner in the firm, Ashley French. Ashley, good to have you.
Thanks. In this presentation, we discuss how you need to review and possibly update your employee handbooks and the policies that you might have for your business. And some of the reasons you might want to do that would be any new case law or updates or changes to the law. If you are changing the way you conduct your business. Obviously, businesses, and we've talked about this earlier, sometimes a business will have a handbook, but it's not revised or reviewed annually, and maybe not for a few years. And sometimes having an old handbook is basically worthless to you. It's better to have no handbook at all. And there are reasons to update your handbook, which include changes to the law or any new laws, new technology, and changes in how you conduct your business. That's not the only thing you need to review annually. You'll want to look at the procedures of how you implement those policies. It might be something for IT. And IT would need to know certain things about legal holds or their backups, or new equipment that they might have purchased that changes the way certain things are run in the office. You'll also want to look at any forms that you use throughout your business. Maybe it's unemployment forms, maybe it's vacation requests or something simple, but you want to make sure that they're updated and reflect any current policies of the employer or updates to the law that's required to be in the form. And this is just talking a little bit more about the department policies. Department policies are rarely in the actual employee manual. And a lot of departments don't even have their own manual, but it's a good idea to try to have some kind of guidelines for departments that need them. I've seen where a lot of employers will take the old handbook from last year, they'll make changes to it and just kind of save over it. And when it comes to litigation time, and we know that statute of limitations in most lawsuits is about 2 years down the road, they want to know what the employee handbook was for that time period, not as it is now. So all your policies, procedures, handbooks, departmental handbooks need to be saved and have the effective date on them. Changes to the laws. 2010 wasn't as hot as 2009. But there are some things that would affect the employer, and it's not an exclusive list that I'm going to go over today. But there was a change where the Federal Labor Standards Act was amended to reflect that nursing mothers must be provided a private room 1 year following the birth of their child. This only applies to employers with over 50 employees if it would cause an undue hardship on a smaller employer. But it should actually be part of your policy for no matter what size. There's also been changes to the U.S. Department's Labor, Wage, and Hour Division under FLSA, the overtime, where they've created the distinction now between production duties, what the business does, and which are no longer exempt under the administrative exemption, and management duties, which is still your finance, HR, which continue to be exempt. And when you go through looking at your classifications of different jobs in your company and the duties associated with them, you have to decide, is this an exempt or a non-exempt job? And one, you want to make sure that that job description is up to date and it actually reflects what that position is responsible for. Also, changes to laws or new laws. The Federal Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act became effective November 21st, 2009, but last November there were some regulations that kind of amended it. And basically what it says is the employer may not request, require, or disclose genetic information. And genetic information includes any information about an individual's genetic tests and the genetic tests of family members, as well as information about the manifestation of a disease or disorder in an individual's family or medical history. Same thing with harassment. You can't harass someone or make offensive comments about genetic information or of a relative. And the harasser could be not just someone you work with, but maybe it's a client or a customer of your employer. The new regulations provide you model language to insert in your handbook. This is included in your discrimination or harassment policy. It also describes to you how genetic information obtained via electronic media, including websites and social networking, should be handled. If you inadvertently come across information on Facebook of an employee and you're friends with them, and they say, chemo went great today, maybe you didn't even realize something was wrong in the family, but that's something that you inadvertently discovered. We talked about including certain sections of the handbook, but you need to also review your record-keeping procedures and protocols. It should be kept in a confidential place, anything that you come across about that could relate to genetic testing, with other medical information, and locked up and kept away from someone else. It has to be available only to the people in that company who need to see it for purposes of running the business. Well, you definitely, as an HR person, you need to refrain from inquiring into any medical history and try to limit any self-disclosure from the person. There are some exemptions from getting this information because you still have to run your business. If there is an inadvertent disclosure, that wouldn't violate GINA. Genetic information such as the family medical history may be obtained as part of a health or genetic services, including wellness programs offered by the employer on a voluntary basis if specific requirements are met. Family medical history may be acquired as part of the certification process for FMLA or leave under similar laws or local laws or pursuant to an employer policy, where an employee is asking for leave to care for a family member with a serious medical condition, and that would be a very common occurrence. In that situation, you're allowed to obtain this kind of information. Everyone probably has a disclaimer in their handbook, and that disclaimer usually says that you are an employee at will and to read your handbook, and you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. Likewise, you can quit. The one thing that may or may not be in your handbook but should be, it seems just very basic, but it's definitely worth mentioning when we discuss changes to our handbooks. Something that disclaims the employer has some flexibility with the way it applies or interprets or changes these different handbook policies. You don't want to have too much policy or too many rules in your handbook so that you are now limited or boxed in to how you respond to a certain situation. And then as far as the procedure on how to implement this, how do you keep track of who has received this disclaimer or handbook? You would want to make sure that you have either that return receipt read if you've added it or changed a policy in that handbook. Again, like we were talking about earlier, have something from the supervisor that says we went over it, or have people sign that they attended the update. Is the employee actually making a formal report, or is the employee having an innocent conversation? So when someone comes up to you and says, oh, my manager so-and-so, they're just acting all OCD again, and they're really on me this week. What is that? Is that a formal complaint or not? How do you train your supervisors and managers to handle these complaints? As a supervisor, you need to recognize if this is truly an occasion that you're not sure what they're saying, or maybe you just need to document everything that this person says if you notice something said more than once. It's not like you want to walk around with a tablet documenting something everyone says at all times, but if you notice someone saying something where they're bothered by someone else's presence or character trait, their personality, you're going to want to start documenting that. Information that managers need to include, we talked about already a little bit. You want to make sure you have your date, who's drafting the report, who was there, and be very clear. Don't try to use abbreviations or short sentences. You can't promise confidentiality. There's just no way to really keep it, because the office is a hotbed of discussion and rumors and gossip and so forth, but you want to let witnesses know that you're going to do everything in your ability to maintain confidentiality. Post-employment forms or things to review or maybe create. I think these are forgot about sometimes. Try to get a resignation letter from someone, and it's not always easy. You don't want them to see it as inferring that you're watching out for them that because you think they're going to attack. Like, I need to know why you're quitting. It's more of, well, let us know your notice, put down, what you want to say in your resignation letter, and it can be short. And hopefully that they will say why they're quitting, and it might be a completely different reason 2 years from now, but if you have that piece of paper, that's good support for your side. And then a form needs to be created for any property that is being returned.
Actually, in the presentation, we talk a lot about the way technology is impacting employers and the advent of new technologies. Can you talk a little bit about how the advent of things like PDAs and iPads and are impacting the workplace?
Yes, it impacts the workplace in the employee's expectation for privacy and whether the employer is permitted to read their emails, look at their texts on their PDAs, and a lot of it will depend on whether it's employer issued and what the notice to the employee is. So your handbook should have a policy, a clear policy on what the expectations of the employee should be. The law is changing every day in this area, so you'll find that there are some distinctions across the states and what you're allowed to do, and you also find that depending on what your handbook says, the policy, a lot of times it comes back to that, and so that will govern what the employer is allowed to do. Not only that, but as far as technology in your IT departments, you want to make sure that there's certain policies in place so that they know how to handle things such as a legal hold if litigation is instituted against the employer. And doing regular audits or annual audits to make sure that the technology is up to date and things are being backed up or saved as they're supposed to be. Another thing we discuss is how to image a computer when the employee leaves so that you can get that a snapshot or a picture of that employee's computer and then get that computer back out into rotation for the rest of the employees.
And then another great tip is to be sure that employees that sign off when they receive a piece of technology, and that when they leave the company that you have a checklist to make sure that they are returning all of the equipment that they were provided.
Yes, we've noticed that there's not a checklist of different PDAs or computers that were given to that employee and have been returned at the end of their employment. There's nothing to show that it's been returned. They might do an exit interview, but there's no list of things that have been distributed to this employee. So really you need IT to keep track of what's been given to the employee, and then HR in the exit interview keeps track of what has come back. For instance, if IT has passed out 2 PDAs within the past 5 years, HR might not realize when they get one back that there's still another one out there, and that other one would have your customer list on it. So you have to keep track of what you're distributing, and that includes software as well. And then make sure you have record of what comes back to you in case there's an issue later on with some improper solicitation.
So really the challenge with technology is twofold, because you have a rapidly changing law, but you also have rapidly changing technology that's causing such a frequent turnover of equipment and new ways to communicate.
Absolutely, and it's really relatively inexpensive to solve some of these problems, maybe to image that computer, cost you a few $100s, when later on down the line, if someone institutes litigation, it's going to be much more expensive.
Actually, I guess there's some pending legislation right now in the West Virginia legislature that could affect employers in 2011 and beyond. Can you tell us just a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. A couple of the notable policies that would affect employers include Senate House Bill 339, which changes the Wage Payment and Collection Act in West Virginia. Currently, employers have 3 days, 72 hours to provide the employee all wages earned and owed to the employer that are capable of calculation if they've been terminated. That bill would allow the employer to pay the employee the next regular payday, which is similar to how it is now if the employee quits. There's also House Bill 2390, and that governs the right of an employee to inspect a personnel file. In West Virginia so far, it's mostly up to the employer and the employer's policy on that. But this would actually make a law that under certain circumstances, the employee could request the file and even copy it.